Thanks so much for checking out this session of Sweet Slides 101, which is all about perfecting your pitch deck. I'm Bethany Auk, the founder and creative director of SlideRabbit. We help clients of all sizes tell their stories. Subscribe here so that you don't miss any of our presentation, PowerPoint, or Google Slides related content. Enjoy! Today's session is all about perfecting your pitch. We're going to focus today on making our pitch presentations the most powerful that they can be. So we'll tackle both sales pitches and investor pitches today. So I have a handle on kind of which type is most relevant to our group. If you can pop it into chat, just let me know, are you typically pitching services or products, or are you out there looking for fundraising? Let me know, and then I'll be able to kind of cue to different things as we move through the content. Or both. Maybe you're out there doing both. So overall, we'll walk through kind of weaving story into our pitch presentations. We'll talk about what content your audience wants and needs to see, and also we'll look at some design options for some commonly used slides when it comes to pitch slides. Okay, looks like we've got some investor decks going, so that's great. We've got a lot of investor examples today. So according to the National Venture Capital Association, 89% of VCs expect like a really impressive pitch deck. So I don't have a specific stat for B2B sales, but I think we can assume, right, that the expectations and the reactions are similar. As your first impression, your pitch deck is crucial to get the attention that you need so that you can then capitalize it, right? The more impressive our pitch, the more likely we are to draw the attention of our targets. And of course, only with their attention can we convert them into our supporters or our clients or our investors. So a great pitch deck is really a trifecta of three main core strengths. First, we need a story that will captivate and engage your audience from the beginning. Then we need the right content so that you can supply your targets with everything they need to convert to your way of thinking. And we don't want to include anything that might distract or water down your main message. And of course, you need effective design that drives home your main arguments. And of course, that makes you look professional and trustworthy. So when these three elements come together with a good offering, your pitch really can't miss. So let's start with story. Recently, I was working with some participants in an accelerator close to home. I live in Denver. This accelerator is in Boulder, Colorado. And one participant was seeking investment in an app that will help people with executive functioning disabilities and their caregivers. And this was her opening slide, which I've asked her for permission to use untouched. This slide served as a backdrop for Kathy to tell a quick story about her son, Jack, who's pictured here, and how caring for him and helping him gain independence presented her with some unique insight into the opportunity for technology that can assist both those with these disorders and those that care for them. So it was a really powerful pitch. And a month later, as I was preparing this webinar, I was realizing that it's actually, of the 10 that I worked with that cohort in the accelerator, this is the only one that I remember clearly. A powerful opening, especially one that makes the offering kind of relatable and touches an emotional string if we can, will seat that in memory for your prospects. In fact, according to the research behind Made to Stick, which is a great book on effective communication and organizational success, 63% of attendees remember stories from presentations, whereas only about 5% would remember like a specific stat or specific content. So including stories makes your content much more memorable. And why is it? Right? Stories are effective because that's the way our brains developed. So early oral histories were passed down to teach new generations how to process the things around them and how to stay safe in their world. Stories are very near and dear to how we learn. So we deem them important in kind of like the primal parts of our brain. So a good story shows us why we should care about something and includes some causal information so we know how or why those things might happen and how to expect them. When we can ignite both of these pieces in our content, we increase our persuasive impact and also the memory retention of our audience. So again, because stories were such an integral part of our survival and success in the past, they attract attention right away. So, how do we tell a story, right? We might not all have such personal and moving stories as Kathy's story about Jack. Especially when we're selling things like software. I see sponsorships and services in the chat, and often investments are, really business focused. But the lessons stand true, right? Stories are captivating and they're relatable. So we'll always want to be challenging ourselves to think about, what story can we tell about our solution that will stick with our audience? And maybe even more importantly, what story can we tell about our audience? So a story in the pitch isn't just to catch attention. We also want it to show the target that we have a deep understanding of the problem and their experience. So when we're selling a product or service, we can craft a full narrative that's all about the target. So when we're sitting down to craft that narrative from the beginning, we have to remember to be mindful of our focus. Whose perspective are you thinking from? Too often, pitch narratives are written with a focus on the solution or the offering, the company, or even the person up there presenting. So stop thinking about what you care about, right? Stop thinking about everything that you know that you could be sharing with them. And think instead about what your target cares about. If you're pitching a product or service, think about the pain point or the problem that the client is experiencing. Write a narrative that relates to this problem and how it's affecting their lives or business. Then write about how your solution can change that experience. If you're pitching to investors, we still want to connect with the problem in an initial story, but your overall narrative will end up circling back to what investors care about most, right? And that's viability and ROI. Speaking of investors, if you are sending your pitch in rather than pitching live, please be cognizant. Investors are speed reading these documents. So it's even more crucial to hone your content to your core main messages and get rid of all that fluff that might be distracting. So that's great, but how do we find the narrative, right? And everything that we can be including, everything that we know, how do we whittle that down to what the audience really needs to take away in order to be able to convert? Most experts agree that a pitch deck should be like 10 to 15 slides. And that does not mean 10 slides with the content of 30 slides, right? It means that to be successful in pitching, we need to be simple and direct. So let's do a little simplification exercise. I'm going to ask 4 questions, and I want you to kind of think through how you might answer those in kind of 2 to 4 thoughts each. So the first question is why? Why should they care? What problem of theirs are you solving? What is the opportunity that you're presenting to them? And why should it be important to them? Next, now that we know that they're listening, we've caught their attention with why this is important to them, we can tell them exactly what it is that we're talking about and what is that solution and how it works. Now we want to turn to how that solution is different or special. How do we know that that will work in the instance that we're kind of suggesting? We also want to use this time, this how question, to really prove that we know that we're slated for success. And here's the most important question. So what? What will all of this change for them in the end, and what should they do about it? Always wrap up your pitch presentation with the so what, telling them where to go from here. Okay, so now we've explored how we can start to get story into the beginning of our pitch deck and how we can start to craft that target-centric narrative. Let's take a deeper look at the specific content that will make up the answers to the 4 simple questions that we just walked through. First up, why should they care, right? Why should this even be important? Why should they even pay attention? For sales, we want to focus on the pain point that they're experiencing that your solution can then solve for them. For investors, we want to introduce the opportunity, right? Whether that's a new solution for a gap in a market or a better solution to current offerings. We also want to tell them what the full upside is, right? What is the total addressable market for a solution that works with this opportunity? Okay, so now it's time for what exactly you're talking about. In this section, we want to introduce our solution in a simple and approachable way. And we want to stay out of the weeds for this first conversation, right? We want to say simple and direct. For sales, after you introduce the solution, you'll want to provide context details like its value proposition, stating clearly what it does, and how it will work. How does it fold into their tech stack? How do they utilize the service or the partnership so that they can really kind of get a feel for how this might fit into their professional lives? For investors, we're going to focus here on, of course, what the solution is, and then how you will make it succeed. So we do want to give a little peek under the hood at the solution itself, but we want to stay high level. And then we want to talk about how is this solution built for success? What's our business model? What's our go-to-market strategy? Next, we're moving into the how is it special and how do we know it will work section. And really here we want to focus on proving these assertions with real data. So for sales pitch, we want to focus, of course, on the real numbers, potential savings, increased revenue. What are the upsides of instituting your solution? We want to make sure to talk about implementation and especially any customization so that the prospect can really kind of understand and gain line of sight to what saying yes might look like. It's also important to point out how different you are from the other options out there, especially if they're lower cost. So we want to go ahead and get ahead of any market research they might be doing on their own so that they know that your solution is the most successful. When seeking investment, you'll need to roll back the curtain on your financials a little bit. You'll also want to show that you understand the competitive landscape and that you're primed to compete within it. So finally, you may also want to include a team slide here. You want to include impressive acumen and expertise so that your investors can feel confident in the team of this kind of newly created company or product offering, whatever it is that you're seeking investment for. And of course, the most important one, the so what. So after we've learned all of these wonderful things, what does this mean for them and what should they do about it? The content's pretty similar for both types of pitches here. Essentially, first, we're going to look at something like case studies or proof points. Content that shows that this solution is proven or that it has traction. The more real data we can supply here, the better. And then comes the ask. Whether it's pricing or investment, what is this wonderful solution going to cost to take part in? And then never forget to close to an action, right? What do you want them to do? What's the next step? Is it a demo, second conversation? Is it time to sign on the line? If you don't formally call to action, you're unlikely to have them take action on their own. So now we have a pretty firm idea of what our 10 to 15 slides should contain. How can we share those in an impactful way? Great design can help bolster your message, right? Making your messages, your content more attention-grabbing, understandable, and memorable. Pitch decks that contain visuals, 43% more attention-grabbing compared, according to 3M. Okay, so let's take a look at that important part of our trifecta, design. In this section, we'll look at some real-life examples of some of the commonly used content that we discussed in the previous section. Again, if you have questions about these specific examples, we can always come back to them. So pop those into the question and answer panel. And if we miss them at the time, we'll roll right back during question and answer. So here's an example of a simple opportunity slide. This slide was in a Series B fundraising deck, which was sent out rather than presented. So the text is concise and direct, laying out the opportunity for disruption, just immediately and simply. Very little reading to understand what the initial kind of hypothesis is here. So, but because there's not a presenter to kind of add extra color to these core ideas, this client wanted to add a second slide to elaborate on just why this opportunity was more complex than the initial slide lets on, right? By pacing these building ideas out onto 2 slides, the pitch allows the investor to digest that core hypothesis first, and then learn more about the added complexity that really gives them a true understanding. This added complexity also sets up their value proposition and their go-to market strategy really well. It identifies kind of all the parties that are suffering under the status quo. So in any good narrative, we really want to make sure that early content is foreshadowing or building to or supporting the rest of the deck. A little bit of a change in style here, but this is for this is a solution slide, an intro solution slide for a company selling quick service Mexican food options. They sell to locations like convenience stores and rest stops. So this slide followed a pain point slide that discussed kind of failing food options in these sort of locales. And because this was a live presentation, this kind of a splashy announcement slide adds a little fanfare and drama to the reveal of the solution. From that slide, we would move into this slide, which expands on that value proposition and adds more information about what the solution really looks like. Now the prospect can see that there's 3 brands here and they have different offerings, but all with the same 5 quality markers. Don't forget about real numbers, right? We've been kind of harping on that a little. Quantifying really helps your content feel not just kind of idealistic, but real and fact-based. So in a pitch for this investment firm, we wanted to make the offering more concrete by offering real numbers, even if it's in the form of a general range. So this slide does an effective job of giving a high-level overview of what the offering looks like from the customer's point of view, right? We're selling a service here, not an investment. So we can see the value proposition, we can see their strategy, we've got their potential outcomes and their exit points, and we've also got a kind of a rough time frame. So this adds a lot of context for a prospect to be able to truly understand what it is they might be purchasing. So we're doing this all without getting bogged down in the weeds, right? And that's really important in this initial conversation in order to kind of pique interest. We're putting the audience into a state of active listening and engagement. Okay, so in an investment pitch, it's important to get a little bit more technical. So, right, investors make faster decisions than organizations, and so they want that information readily available in the first review. So in this pitch, which was for a potential online marketplace that has an app element, the mock-up makes the offering more concrete, right? We process visual information faster than written, so make sure that your ideas are real in your slides. Don't just describe them. Here, the investor doesn't have to waste time and energy reading and imagining a potential app. We're showing it for that. We're showing it right to them for quick understanding. This harkens back to our donkey pinata. These are the metric. This is the metric slide that we used in this pitch. We needed to show the trend towards Mexican options nationally because the supplier was looking for national placements in chains across the country. So by showing the growing market, right, we are saying you as retailers would be smart to partner to answer this growing need. And now we'll get into total addressable market. Here's a typical total addressable market slide. It's often called the TAM. This is a familiar format that investors will immediately recognize and understand. We've got some important facts down on there on the left, but the crucial graphic is on the right. The offset concentric circles show the TAM, and they also imply a market approach, which will be further fleshed out later in the deck. So simplified explanation of the TAM. The largest circle is the total addressable market that your offering will play in. The blue circle is the SAM, the serviceable addressable market. So who within that TAM could you potentially service? And the smallest green circle is the SOM, that's the serviceable obtainable market. And that basically means conceivably, what is the section of the market that you could obtain based on your current proposed offerings and your current business model? So in startup or early stage companies, obviously your offerings may grow and change as you succeed. So presenting the full upside to investors is important to show just where this may go. Here's another approach to a TAM slide. This is from a Series B funding deck. So they have a little bit more of a fleshed out market strategy, which they are including along with their market kind of sizing and quantification. This slide really could have easily been 3 text blurbs, which is why I wanted to include it. This shows the importance of informational design, right? We know the investors are speed reading the documents, so making them more visually enticing is really important. So by using a visual hierarchy here, we're drawing the eye to the important numbers, right? Right away we're snapping to the numbers in the blue and black and orange bubbles. We're implying the relative market size with the size of those shapes. And then we're supplying detailed text in the bullets above that doesn't compete with the main ideas, but it's there to add more context. Once the attention of the investors grabbed, they have more context and information available to them as far as the market approach goes. This is a more straightforward approach to a market strategy. This is an earlier stage offering. So investors, of course, want to know first that the idea is viable, but you also have to show that you have the plan to take it to a market in an effective way. So a great idea, obviously, with no plan for execution is not gonna garner the attention of a savvy investor. Another crucial part of both sales and investment pitches is differentiation from competitors. So show that you're the best option for your sales target by comparing your offering to similar offerings in the space. This is a feature comparison chart. We can clearly see the gaps in the competitors' offerings. The sneaky secret to these, of course, is like we just use your features list, right? You may have gaps where the other three don't, but we can be favorable to ourselves in our pitch decks. Another common differentiation visual is the quadrant graphic, sometimes also called the business matrix. Commonly used graphics are a benefit, right? So don't feel like we need to reinvent the wheel, but because the familiarity of graphics like these makes them immediately readable and understood. In this layout, we always want to show ourselves up and to the right. In this case, we're saying we're more efficient and more intuitive than the other options in our space. Once we've established that we're a better solution, which we've done so far in the deck, we should prove that our offering is successful. Proof points can range from like statistics to testimonials to like detailed case studies like this one. Case studies typically outline the problem the client faced and then the solution that we provided. Love it if we can include some customization there, some custom problem solving. And then, of course, the outcomes. And we want to include real numbers, savings, or improvement on bottom line where we can. A slide like this, of course, this is too much text for something that would be presented live. So something like this would be sent in an appendix or after the meeting for the prospect to review in depth at their own pace. To include proof points in the live presentation, it's better to go with less text and more generalized success metrics. These can supply kind of like an overview of the potential benefits to your prospect. That way we're piquing their interest so that they, are invested in a deeper review of the detailed case studies. Another form of proof point is a client or partner's slide. Using recognizable logos helps the prospect understand whether they make sense in your cohort of clients. It might also add some urgency if they see some competitors in there and they're taking advantage of your benefits. They may feel like they're missing out. This client, our client pinwheel here included some features here. They were echoing statements made earlier in the deck. It's always great to drive home some of those features and benefits. So now it's time to close. We must close to an ask. What action do we want the prospect to take based on what we've just shared? In this example, our client 4Q has a very firm path to their implementation, right? So this kind of concrete action plan makes it really easy for the prospect to move forward. While a sales deck should be a clear indicator of next steps, in the investment world, we need to be very clear about what we're going to do with that investment. What's the plan for the spend? Where are we developing? Where will the investment get us? So in this slide for our client Kinetic, we paired projected ROI numbers with the spend strategy, all intended to give the investors confidence as we make that final ask. Quick reminder to pop any questions you have to Audrey because we're about to wrap up. But first, let's review today's takeaways. First up, we can use story to grab attention and make the problem relatable or understandable to our audience. When you're building out your narrative, make sure you're centering the experience, the knowledge, and the goals of your target, whether that's a prospect or an investor. Simplify to just your main message so that you can know that it's really coming through, and back up what you're saying with real numbers wherever possible. Invest in design that makes you look professional and trustworthy. All your visuals should illustrate your main points, making everything easier to understand and, of course, remember. If you can bring the trifecta together, you'll rise above the noise of your competition. Quickly before questions, I just want to thank you so much for coming to this Sweet Slides 101 webinar. Due to our pipeline and capacity, we are taking a hiatus from the full-length webinars, but don't worry, we're still pumping out a ton of useful content to improve your presentations. So catch shorter form videos on how-tos and best practices on LinkedIn. We also share presentation trends and longer form articles there, all about presentation skills. All of these webinar replays, including the others in this series, and our tips and tricks videos will be housed on our YouTube, so you can seek us there. If you want to be sure that you never miss anything, we do like quarterly-ish newsletters. They're not overwhelming, that will kind of wrap all of these things together in a set of links. So be sure to sign up there, especially if you want to know when we do bring the full-length webinars back, that will go out to our newsletter list probably first. So keep in touch. Audrey, did we have any questions? Did you get any DM'd or in the question and answer panel?
Yes, I did get someone that messaged me directly. They said, I've heard you should leave team slides out, question mark.
Right. So I did have a team slide in there. You'll notice it was in the investor narrative and not in the sales narrative. People often have team slides and we often see them popping into the front of the deck. I do not recommend that, right? That's when we are focusing on ourselves. So we want to give the audience a reason to care before we kind of start droning on about ourselves. The team may be a reason to care, especially in the case of like consulting or teaching. We need to know that the team has the experience. But typically, when that's not the case, we do want those slides to come later in the deck to kind of bolster the arguments we've already made, rather than kind of slowing down the pace and taking the focus off of the experience of our target. So also keep those bios short. If you are featuring education or previous work experience, use logos in there, add visual interest, and make sure we're not, that we're being as concise as possible so that people actually want to read the bios that you supply. Okay, I think we're close to time, so I better wrap up. If we didn't get to your question or if we can help in any other way, please don't hesitate to reach out to us, connect with us, or just connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm fairly active on there, so let's stay in touch and we'll hope to see you soon. Thanks so much, everybody.